Thanks for joining us at Church Experience Online. If you'd like to learn more about the church, get connected to our community, or help fuel the movement by giving, just check out the link to our website in the description below.
Leadership. That's the topic that we've been going after these last few weeks, and specifically through the life of King David, a man that the Bible says is a man after God's own heart. And we learned so much about him on what it looks like to live a life that makes a difference. And you know, the whole theme of this series is that leaders build better lives for themselves and for those that they influence. And leadership, as we've talked about in these last few weeks, really is that. It's influencing others. It's influencing the world. In the name of Jesus is what we get to do. And so that's where we're going. And today specifically, I felt it was going to be the last week of the teaching series, and I felt like God was saying to go another week. And so I'm going to teach this week on the faith of a leader, and then I'm going to actually wrap it up next week with another part of David's life that I'm excited to talk about. But today, the faith of a leader. And you know, it's fun to be home. It was so great to be gone on vacation and see family and get refreshed and all that, but it's just so good to be home and be back here at Church Experience and get to teach again. And I was thinking about this topic, and I was thinking about our trip, and you know, a story that came to my mind. We were having a good time with some family, and the cousins were all playing out on the deck of the house we were at. And apparently, one of the brother-in-laws came and told us that there was a snake outside, and that the young kids, being oblivious to the danger of it, were chasing the snake around on the deck. So later, some of us came out to check out the situation after the snake had disappeared, and we were looking around trying to find the snake, and I spotted it in a tree right next to the deck. So my father-in-law, Jennifer's dad, and I went out, and we caught the snake, we caught it, and he looked at it, he examined it, he knows a lot about nature, and he says, you know what, this is a water snake. And this water snake, being as young as it is okay, it's not going to bite you, it's okay to touch. And so after some time of testing this out a little bit, the grandkids all started coming over, all like 8 of them that were there, and they'll come over and they're touching the snake, and they're starting to hold the snake, and it's like part of you is fighting this in your mind because you're thinking, this isn't good, right? I mean, for kids to be holding a snake, like someone's going to get bit, and he kept assuring us, like, it's okay. But then it built. He's like, well, why don't we put the water snake in the pool and see what happens? And so the water snake ended up in the pool, and he's swimming around in the pool, and it's like, oh, that's cool, but you know, these things always escalate, right? That's not enough, so it's like, well, why don't we swim with the water snake in the pool? And so, a few of the adults are like in, and then all of a sudden, like 10 minutes later, like the scene is like there's this snake, as you can see in these pictures, like there's the snake in the pool with like 10 grandkids, eight grandkids, multiple adults, like this huge crowd of people around this snake in the pool, and they're holding it, and my mind was saying like, okay, this is not normal, right? Seriously, like this is not normal. Like we're swimming with a water snake with young kids. This is not normal. Like, is your family normal? Because I'm thinking that our family is not normal like that. But you know what? It was the belief and the assurance of my father-in-law to say, it's okay, the snake won't actually hurt you, that gave everybody else permission to jump into the pool and to hold the snake and to touch it. I was thinking about leadership, and the interesting reality is that very few substantial things that we do in life are not fueled by our beliefs. And when you believe something, whether it's to be safe or dangerous, good or bad, something you should do or something you shouldn't do, all the things that we do in life are generally fueled by an underlying belief. Sometimes the whole belief system, it's fueled by our faith, and whether it's something that we should or shouldn't do. And so actions as a leader, we've been talking about in this series so far, our actions, the way that we influence the world, those things are so important, absolutely. But our faith, perhaps even more so, because our faith is what fuels our actions. And so as we talk about the faith of a leader today, it's so important for you and I to dig deep, because your faith, and most importantly, how you view God, what you believe about God, that'll impact your world. What you believe about other people impacts your world. What you believe about yourself in light of what God believes about you. These things are so important, and they fuel and they impact in significant and lasting ways our actions, who we become, who we are. So it's our beliefs, it's our faith is so important. We're going to look at a story here from the life of David. We've been studying his life. He's a great leader. I love the convergence of the historical human side of the story of David, and then the spiritual side and all that God did through his family history and so much that we can learn from, and it's recorded for us in the Bible. But out of all that we know about David, probably the most well-known story about David is his battle with Goliath, right? I mean, even if you don't know a lot about the Bible, you hear the phrase David and Goliath, you know about David, you know the little guy fights the big giant and he wins, and it's this great story, and you know about it. It's an inspirational story, but I think there's more to it than just that. And I want to today look at that story as we talk about the faith of a leader, because I think this moment of faith for David, this moment where his faith was really put on display, that's what really fueled him into leadership. Really, that's truly a key moment that fueled him into being an influencer, that fueled him into being an influential voice, an influential leader. And so 1 Samuel chapter 17, let's begin and look a little bit about what it says about Goliath. It says, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine and you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects, but if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and were terrified. So what's the big deal? I mean, they got these two armies lined up, and this guy steps out and he's like, "Come fight me, and if anyone can defeat me, then we'll be your servants if I defeat him." Well, the problem was that this was not just a normal warrior. Yes, he was well trained from his childhood to be a warrior, but he had the physical stature of a monster. This guy, they say, was probably 9 foot 9 inches tall, somewhere around 9 foot 9 inches tall, just a absurd size for a guy, just a huge man. And he had his weapons that were also larger than life, and he was just intimidating to look at, so much so that every trained, experienced fighting man in the army of Israel were terrified. No one was like, "Yeah, I'll take him." Even though there was a reward on the line, like no one, because Saul, he had issued a reward if anyone could defeat this guy, but you know what? Nobody was stepping up to the challenge. They were all terrified. They were all terrified of him. And rightly so, because he was a giant. As you look out onto the battlefield of your life, you see any giants? You see any immovable mountains as you look out into the future of your horizon? Do you see any uncertainties, unknowns that induce fear in you? Because if so, then you're at home in your humanity, because all of us have those moments from time to time. And if it's not right now, you just wait a few weeks. It's going to come, because here's the thing. We all have moments where fear rises in us, or anxiety, or stress, or concern, the unknown. And our faith in those moments is so important when we're facing the Goliaths in our life. And David was literally facing a giant. Let's go on in the story, verse 17. It says, "Now Jesse said to his son David." So David, the king that we're studying, is not a king at this point. In fact, he's a shepherd boy. He's in his father's house. In fact, he's still such a young man that he didn't even get invited to the fight. He didn't even get invited to the battle. He's at home helping the father take care of the family business while his brothers are out at war, and dad's concerned about the brothers. So he sends David off again in verse 17. He says, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines." Let's jump down to verse 21. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies. So he brings his supplies for his brothers. He sees the battle going down and all the troops being mustered, and so he leaves his supplies with the keeper of supplies, and he runs to the battle lines. He asks his brothers how they are. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines, and he shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. So every time Goliath steps up to the battle line, he's like, come on. Like, all these fighting men, they retreat in fear. I mean, they're afraid. Well, David's seen some battles before in his life. None like this. But in protecting his father's sheep, he's had to fight wild animals, and he's no coward when it comes to a battle. And so he starts to ask around, like, why is no one attacking this Goliath? You know, he's defying God, and he's standing. Why is no one? And he's one of the younger guys in the crowd, maybe the youngest there on the battle line. And the word starts to circulate a little bit that this David guy is kind of open to fighting Goliath, and no one else wants to fight him. So the word gets to the king. The king summons David. Let's look at this again in verse 31. It says, what David said was overheard and reported to Saul. Saul's the current king of Israel, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. You know, I'm thinking of the New Testament words like, no one looked down on you because of your youth. You know, and like, you might have some people looking at you and say, hey, who are you to do this, right? Like, I mean, your parents, they ended up like this. You're not going to do this. Or I mean, who are you to have that opportunity or that education or to take that step or to make this, I mean, who are you? And you probably have had people look at you like they looked at David and said, man, come on, it's not going to work out. Like, you don't deserve that. You're not good enough for that. You can't make it, and you don't measure up. And maybe you've been there. Maybe that's how you're feeling today as you sit in your seat, is that you've been feeling that way. Well, David, he can identify this guy who would go on to be one of the most influential leaders in human history, and looking at him and say, hey, who are you? Who are you? Verse 34, but David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. And I think it's a quality we're going to see in David is he went after it. He went after it. And he said he struck it. He rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair. I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. See, what I love about David is his faith. It's the faith of a leader that is the catalyst for their conviction. It's the faith of the leader that's the catalyst for their action, that pushes them to act on behalf of God and to make a difference in the world. It's when you have the conviction that when Jesus is in it and he's calling you into it, then he can win it. It's in his power that you succeed and that you accomplish and that God uses you to influence. It's not in your own power. And the reason why I think everybody else on that battle line was afraid, you know, as we think about our Goliaths in life, and they're looking at theirs, they're looking right in his eyes, and the reason why they retreated is because when they looked at Goliath, they were measuring the strength of Goliath with their own strength. I think in the faith of David, the faith of this leader, there was a seed of something else that was not driven by fear. I think it was something that's so important for you and I to grab a hold of. And in David, he had this faith that it wasn't about measuring his strength and the strength of the Goliath in his life. It was about measuring his strength, the strength of this Goliath in his life against the strength of a greater God in his life, against the Lord Almighty in heaven, his God. And he saw that his God's strength was much greater than Goliath's, and so he had nothing to fear. And he said, why does this God defy the armies of the living God and no one do anything about it? Our God is greater than Goliath. And God is greater than your Goliath. I don't know what financial crisis is in your life or what relationship is falling apart. I don't know what fear you have about the future or worry or anxiety that's causing you not to be able to sleep at night. But listen, whatever Goliath stands in the way of you and the potential that God's called you to, it is not greater than your God. Your God is greater than the Goliath in your life, no matter how big the Goliath is. But if you measure Goliath based on how much strength you have, then you will be overwhelmed. Then fear will rise. That's why you have to keep it in perspective. And David did that. And he had a moment here to display great faith. And I think that word is important, that he displayed great faith. He didn't grow great faith in that moment. That wasn't like the moment where all his faith was formed. It was a moment of testing. A moment to put on display what he had grown over a period of time. Did you hear what he said to Saul? He said, I fought the lion. He's not saying this arrogantly. He's saying that God had helped him. The God is with him. And he's saying, I fought the bear. And God gave him success in these battles. And he grew his faith when no one was watching. They say that the definition of character is who you are when nobody's looking. And he was out tending sheep. He was out doing his own thing. And he had the faith to go after. Remember that words that said he went after the lion and the bear? He had faith to step out onto the battlefield even when there was not a crowd of people, when there was no reward for fighting Goliath. For him it was about duty. It was about honoring God and living for him, and he had character. And so he went after what he had to go after. And in doing that, his faith was formed over time. In your notes, I want to encourage you to write this down. Faith is formed on ordinary days. It is displayed on the extraordinary days. You'll have an extraordinary moment where you're standing in front of a Goliath. And in that moment, how you have lived, the sum total of your choices leading up to that moment will be put on display. Whether you cower back or whether you step onto the battlefield, that's really a display of the faith that you have grown and built up over the years. I think faith can be formed out of faithfulness to trust God in many sequential smaller steps. You take a small step each day and you trust God with this, and then you trust God in a smaller step over here, and then a little bit bigger leap over here, and then one day you're standing at this huge chasm and you're like, man, this is so far beyond me, and God says leap, and you're like, okay, God, every other time you've called me to step over that little puddle and then take a little bit bigger leap, and every time you carried me, and so God, I'm going to put my life in your hands, and I think that's how it happens. And it's displayed in the great moments. It's not built only in those great moments. So how you doing? I think maybe there's some here today who are in leaner times in your life. But I think it's in the lean times that we learn to trust God, not in the times of plenty. There's some here who may feel like there's a lot of silence. David out under those stars at night watching the sheep, there wasn't a lot of excitement. It was pretty mundane, and sometimes the mundane can cause fear in us because we're like, am I missing out? Am I doing the right thing? Like, there's not a lot going on. But I think it's in the stillness that we learn to hear God's voice. Not in the times where things are fast-paced and moving and shaking. It's as a leader, you learn to hear God's voice in the stillness, in the in-between times, in the margins. It's when you learn to hear God's voice in his whisper. In college, before Uber was a thing, before Lyft was a thing, I hitchhiked from the town I was in to the next town over so I could hear this preacher that was coming to town. His name was George Verwer. He started a missions organization that had a huge impact and sent thousands of missionaries around the world, and I just wanted to hear what he had to say. And so I hop in a car with somebody I don't know, not a good idea, and I travel to the other side of town and get to hear him speak, and man, it was so impacting. And one of the things that George Verwer said in one of his books, great man of God, he says that many times God does not open up more opportunities until you have acted on the present one. The first step is always the hardest. It's easy to redirect momentum when it's moving, but when it's not going anywhere, it's hard to build momentum. And I think if we could take that first step and trust God with it, God will do more through you than you can imagine as a leader to influence the world for his kingdom. But you got to begin moving. You got to start stepping. You got to take that step and trust God. And you know what I like about David is that he had the faith to step out onto the battlefield. He had the faith to step out onto the field where the sheep were to protect them from this wild animal. He took a step of faith. And you might know what your step is, and if so, then take it. And you might not know what your step is, and that's okay. If you don't know what it is, that just means that your step is to step more into God's presence and find out what he wants from you. And you just chase him until he lets you know what he wants, and then you take that step. And that's going to be the cycle for the rest of your life. That's how we get with God and we say, God, what do you want me to do? We hold on to him, and we take another step. But faith is formed in the ordinary days. It's those little decisions. We think of the great moments when we think of faith. We think of great leaders. We think of great moments in history. But I think faith is really formed on those small decisions every day that seem insignificant at the time, but that are building your character. Am I going to trust God in this? Am I going to do the right thing in this specific choice? And this thing I say, this thing I do, this thing I post, this thing I talk about, how I talk about this, am I going to display character? Am I going to honor God in this? And in those moments, your faith is being built, and God's growing up a leader. And it's in those moments that our character's formed, but ultimately displayed in the greater moments. It's how anything works in life. Anything great that you and I would look at and say, that's great, it's backed by many other things that have made it great. For example, a great marriage. If you look at someone, you're like, man, that's a great marriage. They've been married a long time. It's a great marriage. You know what? That's backed by years, usually. Years of serving each other, putting each other first, asking for forgiveness and apologizing and extending forgiveness, mending, things, and shared moments together, listening to each other, loving on each other, caring about each other. And it's a sum total of all that, when some of it can be messy, that leads to the great marriage. Of course, throwing a lot of flowers and chocolates and all that stuff too, that just makes it a good thing. Great kids. Same thing. Great kids that just happen. It's a parent or parents coming along their children, and a mother and a father saying, all right, man, we're going to just love on this kid. We're going to listen to them. We're going to spend time with them. We're going to care for them. We're going to watch out for them. We're going to discipline them when they get off track and redirect them. We're going to coach them and teach them about God and His ways, and teach them truth, and protect them from evil influence in their life. And we're just do all these things. And of course, playing Legos and catch at the football, playing dolls, whatever. And all that helps too. But it's a sum total of all those things that develops a great kid. So anything in your life, it's great. It's the preparation, it's the training, it's all the little things that add up to something great. I don't get the time these days with 4 little kids at home and the season of life we're in to watch sports games like I would love to. I like to play sports. I rarely get to watch a full game, but man, it's fun in the rare moments I get to. And so we're on vacation, and I got to hang out with some family, and it happened to be perfect timing because it was the NBA Finals, and I love basketball. And so I got to watch a couple of the games. And watching these guys, it blew me away, because as a basketball player, watching them play, I was amazed. And I just have a real quick clip here. If you missed it, you missed the final game, here's some highlights from the finals. Check it out.
Fakes, drives on Barnes, left-handed, banks it in. Real, one of the more dominant first quarters you'll ever see in a playoff game. As Green, Cavalier offense the last couple of games has been so efficient. As Kyrie Irving. Another. There comes Curry the other way, 2-on-1. Curry the drive and the finish. Irving drives on Green, gets inside, off balance, comes up short, gets his own rebound, and Curry crossover, three-pointer, it's good. Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. Curry running hard by Iguodala.
Woo, that gets my blood pumping. I don't know about you, that does something for me. I want to get out on the court and play. And I grew up like probably a lot of kids, maybe some of you in the room, and I grew up thinking, man, when I get older, I'm going to play in the NBA. Like, that was like the dream. You're in middle school, high school, you're like, I want to play basketball. That would be a great career. I just love to play basketball. And you know what? I would imagine there was, thousands, millions, like kids that grew up with that dream. But a few of them actually prepared for that. They prepared for the moment. And they overcame, and they were given an opportunity to step out and influence and all that kind of. They were given the opportunity that they had prepared for. I think that the problem is not that the opportunities are not there. I think is a lot of us don't prepare for them. We don't prepare, and we bounce from thing to things. We're serial quitters. And you know what? I love what my friend Jason Berry, who came, and I so appreciate him to teach a few weeks ago. I love what he said. He said, "What you do in your downtime will determine your destiny." And isn't that good? What you do in your downtime will determine your destiny. And how many wasted years, how many wasted moments and opportunities. But the thing I love about God is that when you give your life to Him and you say, okay, Jesus, I have my flaws and failures. I have my past. I have my wasted moments, wasted years. You give it to Him and He redeems it. And nothing truly is wasted. He can take it and change it and use it. But you have to take that step, and you have to put your life in His hands. And David, he was the kind of guy who did that. He had the faith to put his life in God's hands and to take a step. to prepare for the moment, he did. And when he was in the moment, his faith was displayed in extraordinary moments. It was Pastor Craig Groeschel who said, remarkable people do consistently what normal people do occasionally. I saved that and I put it on the top of the list of things I need to do every week just to remind me. Because you think about it, most of us, most people, what's most natural to me to do is just the easier route, what we don't feel like doing. You know what? People who really make a difference in the world, they do consistently what we're all tempted to do just sporadically. And they go after it week after week, and they're faithful. And faithfulness is what leads to fruitfulness in your life. So how are you doing with that? Are you being faithful to let God form faith in you as a leader? And as you are faithfully pursuing what God has for you, God will use that, and he will use your life. Let's go on in the story. Faith is formed in ordinary days. It's displayed in the extraordinary days, and David is in one of those extraordinary days. His faith has been formed all these years. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 45, he gets to go after it. This is his opportunity, the opportunity that eventually launches him into leadership and eventually to being a king. Verse 45, it says, David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." He says, the battle, the victory that will be won, and it's going to be won, is not won by human weapons. The battle is won by God. And he says that's where victory is coming from. So David is not an arrogant leader. It's not self-confidence, it's God-confidence that he has. And he says, my hope is in something greater. And so when I look at Goliath, I look right through him and I see a God that is more powerful. And so he knew that the odds were in his favor. And I put it this way in your notes, I encourage you to write it down, is that God's favor, he knew this, God's favor puts the odds in your favor. And David knew that. He knew that God's favor is what really matters. And in your life, the difference maker for you to make a difference is God's favor. And David, he knew that. And I think as we mature spiritually, we move from I can do it to God can do it through me. See, it's a subtle difference, but it's such an important difference because I can do it has its limitations. I'm all for that. You can do a lot of things. You can accomplish a lot. You can be successful, so to speak, in a lot of different ways in this life. But for you to really accomplish all that God has for you and you to be successful in eternity, it's a God confidence that matters. God can do it through me, not I can do it. It's God's work through us and in us. Gary Hagan, who is the leader of IJM, International Justice Mission. We used to live near Washington, D.C., and had a friend that worked at IJM, and they helped bring justice to the world. And Gary says, despair comes from focusing on what we can do. And you could see how we would say that as they're fighting human trafficking around the world and all the modern-day slavery and all the crazy things that are going on. He's like, despair comes from focusing on what we can do. Man, how are we going to win this? What can we do? He says that's where despair comes from. Hope comes from focusing on God and what he can do. Yeah, the odds might be against you, but when God's favor is with you, then the odds are in your favor, even though the odds seem to be against you. You know what I'm saying? So David got that. And that's why it's important for a leader to understand this. That it's so important for a leader to have this faith that's deep inside you that no matter what the odds are, when God is in it, you can still win it. That God is with you. And as he steps out on the battlefield, he knows that he has a confidence in something greater than what he's standing against. And so in your life, as you look at whatever you stand against, as you look at the future, as you look at your lack of that measures up against the need in your life, you can know that you don't have to depend on your own power. You can depend on God, and you have to hold on to him. I like to participate in board sports. And that's something I've always loved doing. I've told you about that, surfing and skateboarding and snowboarding, all that kind of stuff. That stuff has always been like, for me, just adrenaline pumping, fun. Like, if I want to go do something fun, like that's what I would love to do. And when I was in Michigan in our vacation visiting some of our family up there, we were driving down the highway, and I was with my brother, just me and my middle brother, and we were doing some errands. And I looked out the window, I'm like, hey, what's that over here? I don't remember seeing that before. And he's like, yeah, that's this new thing that they built. It's a wakeboarding park. I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah. He's like, you want to check it out? I'm like, absolutely, let's go check it out. So we cruise over there, we're checking it out, and just watching these guys out on the lake. And what it is they have made, I guess there's about 20 of them now, and several of them are here in Florida. And they take a lake, and they put these big poles all the way around the lake. They have arms on them that hang out over the lake, and they stretch a cable around these poles, around the circumference of the lake. And this cable is continuously moving in a circle around the lake. Hanging down from the cable are these tow ropes, like water ski tow ropes. I mean, who thought of this? This is a great idea. So there's like this launching pad, and you get on the launching pad, the cable rope comes around, and there's this machine that kind of hooks it, and you grab it, and it kind of launches you out into the water. You got to hold on for your life, and you're out in the water, and then you just get to go on an endless ride until you crash, or you get so exhausted that you just fall off, and you can just go as long as you want. And they have ramps and different stuff around, and he's like, man, you should do that, Brandon. I'm like, I'm on vacation, I don't know. And he's like, no, you need to do that. And I'm like, all right, I'll think about it. He's like, no, you should do it. And he's like pushing me like a brother, hey, come on, man, you should do it. And a couple days, he's like, man, come on, just do it. While you're here, just do it. And I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So I took my two boys, and we went, and my sons are 9 and 7, and so they're barely old enough to do this thing, but they let them do it with me. So we get wakeboards, we go out there, we're standing on the deck, waiting in line, we get up, and I'm holding on to the tow rope, and the cord zips around, and it pulls me about 5 feet out in the water, but the force is so strong, like I face plant and I eat water. Like just like my boys are like, Dad, And so I try it a handful of times. I keep face planting, hitting water. Eventually, I get out in the water, and I'm going. It's so fun. My boys try it, same thing. They just keep crashing over and over again. Well, eventually, they weren't able to get up on the wakeboard, not for very long, because of just how hard it is to actually get out. And so they said, well, we have knee boards. The younger kids, they can do the knee boards. They put these knee boards on, and they could do it. And it was so fun. There's one corner that was really hard for them to get around. They couldn't get around. They tried, and then finally, they both broke through. And my second son, Kylan, he makes it around the corner. He's the first one to get around the corner, and he's so excited. And I don't know if he wasn't paying attention, or just his momentum took him, or he's just young. But somehow it took him around the corner and up onto the side of a ramp. Like a pretty big ramp, one I hadn't even done. And like he's up on this ramp, and he's woo, and he crashes. He comes back in front of all these adults that are there around the thing. He's like, dudes, I did it. I did the ramp. And he's like going on. It was like one of my favorite moments with him. So I'm back out on the wakeboard out going the park, and there's this huge ramp that I haven't done yet, and I'm just, it's drawing me in. It's like this, it's taunting me. Every time I circle past it, I'm just trying to get the basics down, try not to fall like I kept doing over and over. And as I come up to this ramp, I'm thinking, I got to do this. And so I go off the edge of it, just like the side of it, just a little jump. And then eventually I get the courage. I'm like, I'm going to take this ramp. I'm going to do this. And so I'm approaching it. And I eventually, I made it. I'll show you this. I made the jump. But that's not what happened the first few times, okay? This is how it started, all right? Let's play this. This is me getting close to the ramp, okay? That's the wipeout. This is me trying the ramp, thinking I'm going to make it, and eating more water, okay? So there you see it. And then finally after some practice and drinking a lot of water, I finally survived. So that was my experience. With this rope, that you guys can kind of see it now, you can picture right this cable that goes around the lake. That was interesting that really the cable is what did most of the work. My job was like to hold on to this tow rope and not let go. And I had to have the courage to like move over to the ramps when they came by. But really my role was a simple one. It was to hold on and around every corner, around every obstacle, to not let go of that rope. And I noticed that every time I let go, I wiped out. I drank water. It got more difficult every time I let go. And a lot of times I realized that I let go out of fear. When I was learning, I would come up on something and go over a ramp or something, and I'd let go and I would crash. And I wonder if our faith is not a lot like that as leaders, as we follow God and we get out into the waters of following the Lord and His plan for our life. I wonder if it's not like holding on to Him with all of our strength and staying as close to Him as we can and letting the momentum of the Spirit of God pull us into the future. A lot of times when we face the Goliaths in our lives, we kind of go into a corner and try to figure out our plans, and then we go out, run out on the battlefield like we're going to do something on our own. And I just wonder if it's not more like this, where we're holding on to God, and the strength of God is what pulls us, because when I look at David, it just seems like he kept going back to it's about God. God is stronger than Goliath. And this guy, he defied the armies of the living God, and he's nothing compared to God. And my God is going to win this today. And he had this faith that his God was greater than Goliath. And listen, you can't focus on the mountains in your life. If you meditate on the mountains, you're going to be discouraged, but you got to put your hope in God. If you focus on the strength of the Goliath in your life, you'll be defeated. You have to focus instead on the strength of your God. If you look at the size of the storm in your life, your ship will sink. You focus not on the size of the storm, but the strength of your God. And David, I think he learned this lesson. I think he learned it in the obscure times, and then it was put on display for us to see in the monumental times. He knew that with God's favor, the odds were in his favor. So stop making excuses. Let's stop making excuses. Let's put our trust in God. Let's hold on to him. He has so much more he wants to do in your life, and you need to be reminded of that. That if you hold on to him, and you'll press into him and your family, your future, and every area of your life, he's not finished with you yet. He has more for you, but you have to hold on. You have to step out into the waters and follow him. PK, who you heard from last week, a mentor and friend of mine, he said, God won't loan you his power for your purpose. You can't pull off God's purpose with your power. God always covers what he calls us to, not what we say we'll do. That's why it's so important to get with God and make sure you know what God wants. Because you really can't accomplish all that God's called you to do in your own power anyway. And God's not going to give you his power so you can go do your own thing. It's important for you to know what God's called you to. And David knew that God was calling him to Goliath to overcome for God's people. And so he stepped out on the battlefield, God confident that God was in this and God was going to win this. Because he knew, in his heart he knew. God's favor puts the odds in your favor. I think there's one more lesson here for us in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And it comes from the moment that David had the courage to step out onto the battlefield. It says, as the Philistine, as Goliath, he moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and he struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and he killed him. David ran, it says. He ran towards the battle. And, I think it's an interesting word that he ran towards the battle. Because I would understand if David felt like God was with him, yet he still cautiously walked out onto the battlefield. I would understand if David felt like he was going to win, yet he still very cautiously and carefully approached Goliath. But it didn't say that. It says that he ran towards Goliath. He ran vigorously. He ran towards Goliath. He attacked him. And in your notes, I'd love for you to write this down. Don't ignore your issues. Attack them. Don't ignore your Goliaths. Attack them. You have a Goliath in your life, I'm sure, and if not now, you'll have one, and you'll look at that, and there'll be part of you that will want to draw back in fear, but if you can get faith, and you can understand that God is in it, you may come to the point where you realize you have to face Goliath, but how you face Goliath is really important. And David knew that the only way to go through Goliath was to attack him. He couldn't go around him. He could sneak under him. He had to go through Goliath, and you have to attack the issues in your life. And you know what the issues are. It might be a character issue, and the battle is not an exterior one, it's an interior one, but you know what the battle is, you know what the Goliath is, and you know where the fight's going to be. So run to it, attack it, get godly wisdom, be prayed up before you go in, get air support, get people around you, but don't go alone, but go into the battle with God's help. You're not alone. Go with God into the battle, and don't ignore the issues. For you, it might be a series of hurdles that represent the Goliath in your life. I believe it or not, I ran hurdles in middle school. And what I did in middle school was knock down a lot of hurdles on the track. And when I was learning, especially hurdles, I don't know who invented this and why they invented it, but just you got all these markers down the track, and you got to jump over them as you're trying to get to the finish line. And I'm learning this as like a 7th grade boy, and I'm just knocking down hurdle after hurdle. And it wasn't until I finally learned the secret to get over these things that I was able to succeed. And that was that I had to learn the stride. I had to learn to get my rhythm and momentum. And once I had momentum carried me in the stride and the pace to it, and I knew when to jump, when to leap, that's when I could finally make it. And you probably have a series of hurdles in your life. You might be looking out in the future saying, man, I'm going to have to get through these years of school, and then I got to do this, and then the internship and all that. Man, it's a lot of steps. And man, I want to have a family one day, but I got to find the right person and all this. And how's that going to work? I would love to this job, but man, I'm stuck here, and I got to do this. And all these different things, and you're just thinking like it seems like a Goliath, the road laid out ahead of you. And how you win that is the first step, because you're thinking, I don't know if I can do it. And maybe you, on your own you can't. You're going to have to get some help and all that. But you're never going to find out until you step out onto the track, until you take the first step. And you might knock down some hurdles, but you're going to get some momentum going once you start moving. Once you start moving and you start taking a step, and God's with you, and the wind of God, the Spirit of God comes alongside you, and He accelerates what you could do in your own power, and He helps you. And you start leaping over those hurdles, and you start taking steps, and you start moving, and you start shaking, and God's using you, and impact's being made, and the world's starting to change, and it's changing through leadership, through influence, and God's making your world better. He's making the lives of people around you's world better, because you're moving, and you're running down the track that God's laid out for you. You're continuing to persevere down that path. But it doesn't happen until you take the first step. And I love what Pastor Erwin McManus said. I think it's one of his books. He said, a lot of times we claim we're waiting on God when God is waiting on us. Now I'm waiting on God to take Goliath out of the path. I'm waiting on God to move this issue in my life. I'm waiting on God to resolve this storm in my life, to figure it out, and then I'm going to be faithful. Then I'm going to follow. Then I'm going to do what God's called me to do. Then I'm going to step out. Then I'm going to do this or do that. Listen, God may be waiting on you to make the first move, because God has laid out the path and He's done His part, and He might just be waiting on us to step out. And David, you know what he did? He ran out onto the battlefield. Attack your issue. If your issue is inside, it's a character issue, stop the bleeding. In the bottom of your notes, it says, what's my next step? Maybe your next step that you need to write down is just to stop the bleeding. And wherever it is in your life, you need to attack that issue. And it's a character issue. It's kind of a relationship that you just need to pour into. I mean, I don't know what it is, but there's something in your life that I believe the Spirit of God might be prompting you right now, and you know with clarity what it is. You just need to take the first step. Take the first step. Start moving down that track. God will help you, but step onto the battlefield. Attack the issue. And that blank there in the bottom of your notes, what's my next step? Maybe for some people it's not that. Maybe it's a long-term thing. It's thinking through, okay, my life and what it is. Maybe it's a good life. Maybe it's even a great life, but it's not the kind of life that when I'm at the end of my life, looking backward, and I've lived, God willing, 80 years, maybe 90 years, maybe more, and He gives you this, hopefully you get a good long life. Maybe it'll be half that. None of us know. But whatever the years are that God gives you, when you look back at the end of your life, if you're given that ability to, and you know it's kind of coming to the end, and you look back and you say, wow, man, I'm really grateful that I did this, that I was in these relationships, that God used me to influence, to lead in this way, and it's something that's going to last beyond me. I'm passing away now into eternity, but I'm glad that this still remains, that this investment. You know what's most enduring? It's the things of God. It's investing in people. It's pouring your life into what matters, into eternity. What's going to last forever? It's not the things that we build with our hands. It's not the things that we can put into an account and measure. It's in people's lives. That's what's eternal. So what are you putting your life into? What are you pouring yourself into? Man, I love what we're doing here at Church Experience, and we're getting to pour our lives into people, and lives are changing, and families are changing, and kids are being raised up. And last week, 21 kids have made a commitment to Jesus Christ, and that was amazing. And we're getting to see an impact here. We're getting to help the poor. We're getting to serve. What are you doing in your life that's making an eternal impact? Take the first step. Take the first step. Step out onto the battlefield and let God use you, because He wants to, in a powerful way. Right on?
We hope you got a lot out of today's teaching and will be able to apply it to your everyday life. Again, if you'd like to learn more, get connected, or begin to give financially, just check out the link below. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you real soon.